What's up, Lost Boys? We're back for another fantasy recap video. This is the semifinal playoff video. But first, more importantly, I hope you guys had a Merry Christmas. I love you guys. Best group of friends in the world. Also, if you like these videos, give me a thumbs up, hit that subscribe button. All right, let's get into these playoff matchups we had this week. There were some good ones. We're going to start with our first place team, Cass, versus our fourth place team, Jace. Like I said, these two teams were pretty much in the playoffs the entire year. Jace's team, for the most part, up until that last week, he had the most points. Cass has been in first place the majority of the season as well. Sorry. Cass ends the season 11-4 in first place, and he plays Jace. This one wasn't very close. Unfortunately, Jace's guys, they just didn't perform from him. We're going to start with Cass on this one. His team just continues to roll. His QBs, which were supposed to be his weak point coming out of the draft, they had the most points of any QBs in the playoffs this week. Jordan Love, almost 24 points. Matt Stafford, almost 21 points. So huge bonus for Cass. Then his studs just continue to crush it. CeeDee Lamb, another 20-plus point game. Christian McCaffrey, another 20-plus point game. Even Horse Turd Hair, who's been up and down this year, got another 20 for Cass. And then you almost had 20 points this week. Cass's kicker, Koo. Cass, your kicker position is looking extremely good. I know you are loving that right now. But Cass's flex spots are a little bit weak right now. And unfortunately, the crazy part is his flex spots seem to be the difference of him scoring like 200 or only scoring 170 because the rest of his team is so good. I mean, McCaffrey, I think he may have the most fantasy points this year. I'm not talking about just non-QB players. I'm talking about points across the board. I think he has more than Josh Allen right now, which is insane to say. He's looking like the best first-round pick in our league that we've ever had, if that's the case. So Cass looks like he's rolling with Christian McCaffrey straight to the Super Bowl. But CeeDee Lamb's crushing it. But the big thing for Cass is his quarterbacks. They're rocking it for him right now. Jason, on the flip side, unfortunately for him, that was his only chance, was his quarterbacks. He invested heavily in Jalen Hurts with the first-round pick. He took Dak, who's been a stud, especially in the second half of the season. Jace's main shot to win this week was to have his quarterbacks outscore Cass's quarterbacks by a good amount. And it just didn't happen. He didn't outscore him by any. Cass's quarterbacks beat him. Jace's wide receivers, he did okay. Olave had an okay game, but Diggs no-showed. He's been a no-show for the last 5 weeks. Jace also was sick this weekend, so maybe he didn't get a chance to set his lineup exactly the way he wanted. Reed, they ended up ruling out about an hour before kickoff. That gave him a big fat 0. You can't have that in the playoffs. Hopkins gave him 3, so he had 2 players combined to give him 3 points. That crushed him. Kamara had his worst game of the season, which was a bummer. And Achane, Achane is a boomer bust guy. This week, unfortunately for Jace, was a bust. Calvin Ridley looked great. Jace's kicker looked great. But unfortunately, this game was not close. It was a 40-point blowout. Cass pretty much had this thing under wraps, but McCaffrey was just the cherry on top. Either way, Cass rolls to victory and rolls into the Super Bowl. Let's talk about our next game. This one was closer. Josh versus Ryan. Josh had a big lead going into or during this game. At one point, I think he was at like 97%. But in fantasy, you can never count the game over with until it's over. But his whole game was based on the Lions. His team's been the Lions, and it was Lions in Minnesota. So he had both quarterbacks in that game. He had Amon-Ra, he had Justin Jefferson, and he had Jahmyr Gibbs in this game. So he had 5 players playing in this game, and this was a 30-24 game. And it didn't start off good for Josh at all. Having all 5 of these players going in this game, the first 2 touchdowns in this game, first one, David Montgomery, second one, Ty Chandler. So Josh didn't get any touchdowns from their guys to start out. Didn't look good, but his guys ended up coming around. Minnesota was throwing the ball a lot. JJ finally had a good game after 10 weeks, 23 points from him. Um, Amon-Ra, almost 23 points. Gibbs, almost 22 points. So those guys all stepped up big. The quarterbacks were so-so. They had some turnovers, which kept them down, 14, 16 points. But that was a big game for Josh. Other than that, his team really didn't do much. He drafted heavy at wide receiver this year, and his wide receivers did really good. Minus one guy, Davante Adams, who's a turd for playing on the Raiders, we saw yesterday, and he got one catch for 4 yards. The Raiders managed to beat the Chiefs, as we saw, without throwing for one passing yard in the second, the third, or the fourth quarter. I don't know how that's physically possible in today's NFL, but the Chiefs managed to do it. So Josh managed to get .9 from Davante Adams, which was awful. Ryan, on the flip side, a lot of his chips were in the Bears-Arizona game. He had Justin Fields, he had DJ Moore, and he had Cole Kmet. Fields performed great. He got him 25. There was a really big turn right there in that game. Fields ran it down, was in the red zone, getting ready to score. He threw a pick. It looked like Fields was going to go for 30 plus this game. That touchdown, if he would have scored there, could have gone to DJ Moore or Cole Kmet. So it was a really big swing. I mentioned DJ Moore. He really had a bad game. 3.3 points. Wasn't Davante Adams bad, but it wasn't what Ryan was looking for today. Cole Kmet did good. 100 yards. Did pretty good for him. The big letdown for Ryan was Sam Laporta. He's been the best tight end in fantasy the last 8 weeks, and he had his worst game one of his worst games of the season this week. Really, really hurt Ryan. In general, though, Ryan's running backs after the draft, his running backs were by far the strongest in the league, and they performed this week for him. DeAndre Swift with 15, Zeke Elliott with 16, caught 475 check down balls in that New England game, including a touchdown. And Jonathan Taylor looked like he was going to have a monster game. First quarter, he had 20 yards and a touchdown. And I didn't really get to watch the games. I don't know if he got hurt, but he only ended up with 40 yards the rest of the game. So that could have been a big potential. Speaking of turning points, big potential, there was a swing game. I did get a chance to watch the Eagles game, and there was a turning point where two plays, DeAndre Swift, one of the plays, he got literally held up at the inch line, and then so he didn't get the touchdown there in the first quarter. Jalen Hurts ran it in the next play. So that's 6 points Ryan could have lost. And then later in the game, DeAndre Swift ran it in for a touchdown, but they reviewed it, and his knee was literally on the ground by a centimeter. So they called back the touchdown. The Eagles couldn't convert, and that was a field goal, which Josh had the Eagles kicker. So that was a 10-point swing as well. So this game, it was a 23-point game, but it was way closer than the score admitted. But that was the big thing. So Josh takes the victory over Ryan. Jason and Ryan had phenomenal seasons. They play each other now for the third, the fourth place game. One person's going to walk home with their money back, $100, and one person's going to get the prize of getting to name Cal's team. Now, we're going to look at our Super Bowl preview. This is a big one, boys. This is for all the kahunas. This is the one that, we get our draft together. We do our thing. 17 weeks later, we finally got here. Cass versus Josh. I was curious. I went through and looked at our league the last 10 years. Last 10 years, one of these two guys, Josh or Cass, has been in the Super Bowl 9 out of the last 10 years. That's insane to say. 9 out of the last 10 years, either one of these guys has been in the Super Bowl. So these are two powerful guys, fantasy monsters. Cass is really, really feeling it. I think he won the title 2 or 3 years ago. He's wanting another one. This would be his third title, which would be insane. Josh, on the other hand, he was co-champs with Ryan last year. This would be his 5th title. So he wants it again. He wants to add to his collection. This is going to be a crazy game, though, guys. Getting into Rick, I've talked about the teams. I'm just going to go over them really one more time. Cass has been the number one team all year. His team looks like a beast. It's going to be really hard for Josh to beat Cass this week. His quarterbacks have great matchups. Jordan Love is playing in a dome in Minnesota. Their defense is not very good. Stafford is playing the Giants. The Giants' defense is not very good. So Cass's weak spot is going to be a strength this week. That doesn't include CeeDee Lamb going against Detroit. Their defense is not very good. Cass has Rashee Rice. Mahomes is going to be pissed again. I guarantee you Rashee Rice has a big game next week. Let's hope for Chiefs fans. DK Metcalf, he's been awesome this year. We'll see if he can help Cass. I mean, he's pretty much the only weapon for the Seahawks right now that they're using in the passing game. And then Cass also has Deontay Johnson in that game, so he's really hoping Pittsburgh is a high-scoring game. Derrick Henry going against Houston. Derrick Henry averages about 160 yards in his career against Houston. So it's in Houston, it's in a dome. I'm sure Horse Turd Hair is going to go off this week. And Trey McBride had a bad week. He had an okay week last week. I'm sure he's going to do really well against Philly's defense. They don't do really well against tight ends. And the biggest one, obviously, of all, McCaffrey. He's going against maybe the worst defense in the league in Washington. I foresee McCaffrey putting up 30 points this week. They just lost at home to Baltimore. They're going to be pissed. They're fighting for that number one seed. Shanahan's going to feed McCaffrey the ball. He's going to go off. Cass is going to go off this week. It's going to be a monster game. On the flip side, Josh's team, he put all his eggs in one basket last week with that Minnesota-Detroit game. I think it's going to be the same for him this week. All of his eggs are going to be in that Detroit game. He has his 3 studs, and they're playing Dallas. Look how many guys are going to. Josh has Goff. He has Amon-Ra. He has Gibbs. He also has Jake Ferguson for Dallas. So Josh has 4 guys alone going in that game. Cass has CeeDee Lamb going in that game. There's 5 guys going in this game. Both players want this game to be high scoring for their players. So a lot is riding on this game. And then, Josh has some okay matchups. Justin Jefferson and Nick Mullins, quarterback for Minnesota, they're playing Green Bay. Josh is having post-traumatic flashbacks from last year's Super Bowl. Green Bay and Minnesota played in the Super Bowl when Josh was in it. And Kirk Cousins, quarterback for Minnesota, and Justin Jefferson combined for about 4 points last year. 4 points combined. Now this year it's in Minnesota, so we'll see what happens. But Josh has to have a big game from Mullins. He has to have a big game from Justin Jefferson. And I don't know if it's going to happen because the Packers do really, really well against Minnesota for some reason. Other than that, his matchups are not the best. We'll see what happens, but, I'm not going to make a prediction. I didn't make a prediction last week. I'm not going to make a prediction this week. Cass's team is really, really good. And Josh's team's good as well, but Cass has been the first place team all year for a reason. He scored the most points in the league. He had the best record in the league. He won his first round playoff game by scoring the most points with the biggest margin. I mean, your Cass's team is check marking every box. He's been the best team all year. It's the playoffs. Anything can happen. So we'll see. We actually have no Thursday night games that affect either of these teams. We do have a couple Saturday games. Like I said, that Detroit-Dallas game is a Saturday, so we're going to get started a little bit earlier this week on the weekend. But, the way the times work, we're probably going to know who's going to win the Super Bowl by about 3 o'clock on Sunday. There's not a lot of Sunday night football. I guess I take that back, actually. That was wrong. I mean, Sunday night football is actually a big one because of the Minnesota-Green Bay game. So we're actually going to have to wait till Monday. So there are 0 Monday Night Football players on either of these 2 teams. So here we are. By Sunday night, we will know who the Super Bowl champion is. It's either going to be our new 3-time Super Bowl champion, Cass, or our 5-time Super Bowl champion, Josh. We'll see. Guys, it's been a phenomenal year. I'm going to do one more video just to recap the whole season. Once again, I hope you guys had an amazing Christmas. I love you guys. You have a good day.